We know right now that the British oil explorer Tullow Oil has set 2024, I should say, as the earliest date Kenya can expect to start reaping gains from the Turkana oil. Tuesday's announcement has dampened hopes for economic boost that was expected to start in 2022. The petroleum firm said it will take at least 4 years to reach the commercial production stage, when Kenya is expected to start earning about 150 billion shillings from crude oil exports every year. Kenya is yet to sign with Tullow Oil and its partners the critical final investment decision, without which financiers cannot commit to fund drilling, pipeline and other infrastructure projects required to process drilling. The firm will continue with its non-commercial early oil pilot scheme in the meantime to gather market and production data ahead of the large-scale production. There has been minimal also disclosure on the dealings between Tullow Oil and the Kenyan government, or the Kenyan government, with the British oil giant, even declining to reveal who was buying the crude oil before the government announced the buyers last week. A coalition of 16 civil society organizations under the Kenya Civil Society Platform on Oil and Gas, which has been pushing for the disclosure of the contracts, has repeatedly accused the government of violating the constitution and breeding mistrust by concealing details of the oil project agreements. So let's just pick your brains, Patrick, on this as well. The commercial viability of this project. Are we having pie in the sky optimism as it is?
No, the project is commercially viable for what it is. But it's a small project. It is not going to make Kenya a sort of a big oil exporter. We will export oil, yes, but be the first in this African region.
Yes.
But we are not going to be a rich nation as a result of that oil. That is for certain. And the issues about the delays that are coming into this, if you look at again, back to our values as a country and so forth, when the first early oil export trucks were leaving Turkana, what happened? They were stopped by the local people there. Not because of oil, but because of another problem they had. And they were seeing oil, and you know, the oil is the easiest thing to go and stop. Because it will get you attention. Now, if you look at what happened, and this is really the problem that any investor in natural resources in this country has, we have been so indoctrinated and sort of agitated to think that the minute resources come, we are in heaven. We've got everything in this country. Yet, one forgets that the journey that companies like Tullow, Tiomin, Base Titanium in Mombasa, in mining and so forth, in Kwale, those companies spent a lot of money in terms of ensuring that you could actually extract that natural resource from the ground. And the problem is that we have been telling our people that the minute the resources are there, we are in heaven. The government's responsibility is to make sure that the investor has a clean sailing. The agreements between the government and the investor prior to, I'm going back to the story you just told, prior to the new Petroleum Act, the government had control of information coming out. So the investor, like Tullow, cannot come and announce something unless the government has agreed. Our constitution that
so that is within the Petroleum Act as it is right now.
Before
the
contracts that were signed, that is exactly what happened. And those are the contracts that obtained up to now. The production sharing agreements that were signed prior to the constitution with most of the oil companies are still the ones that are operating now. And those basically clamp down on the company. The government has control and say of everything else. But in some instances, what you're seeing is that the government should also be dealing with the communities and the county governments and everything else to ensure that all the issues that come through have been cleared, and then the investor can continue. But now what you're seeing is that it's hands off, and the person who is on the ground, which is the investor, is the one who's always being hammered to get the government to come to the table. I think the conversation needs to change in the country. And I can see why we are going to 2024, and it may be 2026 and even later. actually, I think was one of the shows here in 2016, sorry, when originally the first oil export was supposed to be this year, 2019.
Yes.
And at that point, I said, guys, not before 2025.
They didn't listen to you.
No. It's not about listening to me. It's just reading the tea leaves on the ground and everything else.
Correct.
And just understanding that we are going on a very, very tricky journey. And the societal expectations are the big unknown. The commercial decisions are very straightforward, right? And the investor now knows exactly he needs his first, his final investment decision, but that is premised on a lot of things having been ticked off. And the ticking of those things is basically resting with the government of Kenya. So they're ready, and they've been ready, I think, for at least a year and a half. But it's a question of ticking off all the different things that need to be done and in place before the final investment decision is made. And that investment decision is about going to get large amounts of money from other people. It's an investor coming from outside and putting money into this particular place and saying, I have certainty that once I put my money in, there's going to be no disruption. And this is big money.
Yes.
So until those things are there, we are not going to see somebody signing and saying, right, we can now invest. Commercially, it is a good project. And it will actually pay. And the amount of money you're talking about, that the return to the country will be there, right? But we need to have very, very clear policy certainty in this country for those kind of monies to be put in. And the small investors are having problems. What about guys of that nature? Right? They will have serious problems, but they are willing to wait because the resource is sitting there, it's not going anywhere. And we as a country need that resource to come out so we can make a bit of money out of it. So there's going to be a cat and mouse game. But until all the preconditions have been met by us as a country, the investor is not really going to move.
So we're stuck up with, with the sort of the old act that is still binding with Tullow and the government.
The old contracts which were signed under the old act.
Old acts, isn't
Yes.
it? So we have the new one, which we have the non-disclosure agreement, but we are stuck with the old.
All those ones are there in the current petroleum act. They're all there. They require all those things to happen.
But wait,
it's the government. If the government wishes, because they're the ones, if they wish to make that information public, they can do so.
They can do so.
But the problem is, the minute they do that and make the information public, the public itself is going to have a different perception. So they're caught between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah, but the Access to Information Act,
Yeah.
where does it come into play? Briefly, let's hear from Collins. We'll come to you.
I was going to say I agree with Patrick until he said, if the government wishes. Because I think this problem of tallow and oil in Turkana has been with us since 2012 when we discovered oil. The one of titanium has been with us since 2002 when we discovered titanium, the one of Thailand. And I think Article 35 of the Constitution, the ban, is not a government wish. It is a Kenyan expectation, the Kenyan expectation of access to information. And I've been in meetings as part of this process with government where Tullow makes that same point. Tullow makes the point that, as we have no problem with the disclosure, this information is the government. The government can just go ahead and disclose. I have had government say, we will disclose, including the former Minister for Energy, including the former President, saying we'll even have a portal. This is 2019, it's not been disclosed. Can you ask yourself, the bar, if all you require is to disclose, why is the disclosure not taking place?
I can tell you.
It is not taking place.
I can tell you, it is pregnant space
Murray
for
will tell
corruption.
you. And you see, exactly. And that is at the heart of the problem. So we can argue about who will not benefit, who will benefit. The reality is that this non-disclosure is benefiting people. And the people it is not benefiting are two. It is not benefiting the citizens of the Republic of Kenya at all. It is not benefiting the Republic of Kenya at all. So we can discuss everything else, but when we have a process where the reality is that whatever we are doing is not benefiting the people and not benefiting the country, then we are living a lie. And we are living a lie because private individuals who are occupying public spaces are trying to circumvent the process. There is nothing, Dibal. Our constitution then says that anything that was there before 2010 is supposed to align with the letter and spirit of the constitution. The requirement for disclosure is an imperative. and it must be disclosed. If you look at these concerns, at the end of the day, a lot of people are left to speculate, including even the county government itself. The reason why citizens will stop the early oil is for a legitimate reason. They've had the expectation that life will be better. Whether falsely or not is a different issue. Now all of a sudden they wake up and they're seeing trucks leaving. To some of them they even think, and I've been to Turkana, and they even think that, there's a time that I think a plane had just landed to bring in equipment. These guys thought that the plane had come to take early oil back to Nairobi. And they're like, but you can't leave this before we are given, because they don't know what is in, they don't know how much is involved, they don't know what we're going to. Yet the solution is a very simple process. The solution would be, why don't we put all facts on the table? If today we are debating whether it is 2024 and not 2022 and not 2026. If you ask anybody in Turkana, if you ask the bulk of the people in Nairobi, except those with insider knowledge, you will not know the reality of what's happening. So what are we left to do? Speculate. One of the other things that is contentious is going to be, the reality is that the company puts in a lot of money in terms of investment. The second reality is, if you ask today, how much have they put in terms of investment? You will not get one unanimous figure across the entire country.
All right.
That's been the debate, that's been the contestation with Uganda. So I think solving that is at the heart. And for me, it's a very easy thing. I don't think that the requirements of the previous law can detract us from achieving the imperatives of Article 35 of the Constitution.
Stanley, you're heavily involved also in the crafting this particular acts as it is right now. And let's pick up your brains on this. You're the energy law expert on this.
Yeah, okay. There is one thing I have to say is that prior to the promulgation of the Constitution, there were a number of production sharing contracts that were signed. And basically, these production sharing contracts were based in the old Petroleum Act. And what happened is that when the Constitution came in and there was the requirement for people to align, then the ministry at that time took the lead and formed a committee or a task force to review several laws so that they can be able to align them with the Constitution. One of the laws that was supposed to have been reviewed is the Petroleum Act, which was actually reviewed, and we have got a new act, Petroleum Act 2019. Now, one of the things that I have to say is that in the Petroleum Act 2019, it has what we call a saving clause, a transitional clause, which is a saving clause. And one of the things that have been saved is all the contracts and all the agreements that had been signed prior to the enactment of the law. So as we speak, the production sharing contract that Tullow signed with government at that time has been saved by operation of law through the saving clause of the Petroleum Act. One, when you look at the PSC, when you look at the production sharing contract, which now we are calling them petroleum agreements in the new law, you realize that it's a heavily technical document. And it explains from the aspect of prospecting all the way to the discovery, all the way to production and to development, up to the point of releasing the oil at the delivery point to, for sale. Now, that particular, there's a procedure. I think in 2011, that is the time commerciality was established and an announcement to that effect was made. And then Tullow went to the ground, now they started the process of developing. Now, the moment they have been developing, when you look at the revenue share, we have got two types of oil. The oil has been split into two. We have got the cost oil and we have got the profit oil. Now, the cost oil is a portion or a share of the revenues that will arise from the sale of petroleum that will go towards meeting the cost of exploration, production, and development. And that is a cost that is ordinarily borne by the investor, in this case, Tullow. And it is not a small cost. And the interesting bit is that in the event that maybe they did all that and they hit a dry well, or commerciality was not established, then obviously that capital sinks. It is actually risk capital that they put in. And in the event that commerciality is established, then they have got the first right to recover. They recover their cost first, and whatever remains is what is being shared. Now, when you see 2024, there are other things that will arise. First of all, you know, it may not be commercially viable to transport oil using trucks. So we may need a pipeline. there were processes and procedures of the development of the pipeline, but due to geopolitical issues with Uganda pulling out and the pipeline route changing and all that, there are all these concerns. So that means even beyond the text of the agreement, there are other issues that have arisen that will make it impossible for Kenyans to start reaping the benefits of this oil within the time that was anticipated in the...
But the Director General of ERC will not really agree with you as it is right now, because he thinks it's transporting oil via trucks is cheaper than pipeline. According, he appeared yesterday. And I think I saw that.
Let's clarify that. Let's clarify that.
Yeah.
You see, we have got two types of pipelines.
This is on page.
We have got pipeline that transports white petroleum oil, which is managed by Kenya Pipeline Company.
That is processed.
That is the one whereby there was a new pipeline that was built at the cost of 48 billion, and you can see what basically the EPRA director is saying is that the tariff that has developed is much higher when you translate it compared to the cost of tracking this particular oil. That is different. But when you're talking about the crude, we need to have a crude oil pipeline that needs to be developed, because the crude cannot use the same pipeline with the oil. So what ERC is talking about is running around the cost of constructing that particular pipeline and the tariff that the oil marketing companies will have to spend.
Amortize that and see how you the years.
Yeah, so he is right. He is right in respect to the line 5 that was built and the costs that are there. So to that extent, he's right. But now, when we are talking about the crude oil pipeline, that is the other type of the pipeline. The crude oil pipeline has to be developed. Initially, for it to be developed, all these financials had to be done. And the first pipeline, the first design, was to Lokichar and then to Hoima. But because of geopolitical issues, that pipeline changed. The Hoima oil, they decided to use Tanzania. It became, I think, cheaper. There are all these arguments that came around. Now, for us to have that particular oil transported to the point of delivery and for export, we'll need to put up the pipeline. Putting up the pipeline will require time. So the 2024 date is actually ambitious for me.
It's ambitious.
It's ambitious. Chances are that we are likely to go to 2026 or even beyond.
So this is a mirage, actually. So coming closer, but it's a mirage.
So I think Kenyans should be able to manage the expectation as to what that will happen.
So what
on the issues of disclosure?
Yes, yeah. Oh, before we come to disclosure, let's hear from Muriel. Oh, yeah. Patrick has to go.
Let me just respond to Stanley's point. The early oil and the cost of early oil is how many trucks a day. When you're doing 80,000 barrels a day, it is completely impractical to export 80,000 barrels a day by road, right? It's literally having a land train, and you're going to choke everything up. So the cost of doing it that way, at 70,000, 80,000 barrels a day, is just not on. So the pipeline is the only viable solution, or alternatively, you build a dedicated train line, right? So you've got a train which is 2 kilometers long, traveling up and down, or 3 or 4 of them going by per day. It's been done in, I think, in Russia. That's how they export heavy oil in Russia, because of winter and everything else. That's the best way of doing it. And they have trains that are kilometers long, and they're traveling on a dedicated line from the oil field to the export.
But that was the initial upset.
Yeah, and that is where you have not 750 whatever it is barrels. You've got about 10 times, 20 times that amount to make that project viable. So let's just accept that is probably, that is a curved ball that guy is talking about. See, it's not really...
He was just in Parliament and he can talk anything he wants. No, seriously.
Allow me to release Patrick, but thank you so much.
Thank you.
And maybe we need to look at Thursdays with board meetings. Should we enact it maybe in Parliament as an official day for board meetings, right?
I think we just need to say, if it is every second Thursday, I'll move board meetings away.
Every second Thursday, I will move board meetings
If
away.
we agree it's every second Thursday that we shall be meeting here, then I'll move my board meetings.
Thank you, Patrick. Right, thank you.
We'll deliver it.
Thank you. You'll deliver it, huh?
Yes,
Because everywhere, every Thursday. Yeah, no, we need to cancel it. there's a board meeting. There's a board meeting, or maybe
He can't
there's a meeting in State House. No, I'm just talking about it. I'm talking about many, you know, also board members as well. Yeah. Right. As you're going, we shall also be listening from Mureo as well. Your input. Thank you so much, Patrick. Right, Mureo.
Yeah, thank you very much. You know, me, I don't want to pretend I'm an authority in oil, as has been displayed by both Patrick and my brother Stanley here. But the truth is, practically speaking, I think the access to information and the management of the expectations of Mwananchi is very important. Because, you know, in the absence of any information, or the truthful information for that matter, Mwananchi is saying, this is it. Now, here we come, we'll be sheikhs, we'll change our address style because we are all going to be oil sheikhs. That is the perception on the ground. The oil has been found. How much has been found? And again, today, Collins and I are speaking from the same side. He has said that, according to the Constitution, the Mwananchi is entitled to truthful, factual information real time, so that you manage their expectation. I am told, and I stand corrected by Wakil here, that the money will be made upstream. By the time you get downstream, you are taking crumbs. The cream is upstream, and the contracts are skewed so that it's from up there that the money will be made.
Yes.
By the Tullows of this world, by everybody else. By the time we get to the petrol station and we are feeding, we are taking the crumbs. The cream is gone. I don't know how true that is. If you look at these agreements, they have a cost implication. There is a cost that these people are, the exploration companies are putting in, which costs must be recouped before we can even start talking of benefiting as a country. How much are these costs? Can we put numbers so that at the end of the day, we are saying it cost me 200 billion to extract, so I must recoup that, and thereafter then the country starts making a profit. And so if we don't manage this, then we end up asking ourselves a big question. Is this discovery of this oil a blessing or a curse to this country? If you are going to have the subjects in Turkana and other places where this oil has been found fighting over a product that they don't even know how much is there and how it will benefit them, then it becomes a curse. It can be a blessing if the whole process is properly managed. And finally, if you look at how we are managing even these investors, and again, I think it's Patrick who has said, the investors have been left to be sorting out all the geopolitical nonsense that goes on with politicians or county governments that have failed to deliver a certain service, and as a result of this, by blocking the road, we are causing them to pay attention to the real problem. Can we treat investors better than this? Can the government play its role? Because ultimately, the government is going to collect taxes, and this oil is going to be managed by people who will bring resources to the country, and the government manages these resources for this country. So can we treat them with respect?
Thank you. Thank you. Right, let's hear from Gituro on this.
No, I think my view is very different in terms of, I think one thing is to appreciate that oil, the future of oil is not as close as it used to be. And I think it's perhaps to think differently when you look at oil. I'm even looking, one of the main consumers of oil, the motor industry. The technology is changing completely. We'll probably be using less. And I had a very good example. Venezuela has the highest deposits of oil in the world. And you can see why it is headed. But I think what is important is not to get this like a resource where we probably have made it. I think I like what Mureo is saying, that you have neoclothes or something like that. But it also gives us, and this is a very sad story standing on the team, the incident we have had literally about 2 weeks ago and last week of Uganda and Tanzania, where the tankers roll over and people are all over and they are banned. It's something we probably give us a level of the kind of people we are talking about, how we look at oil. But I think what is important in my view, and Patrick before he went, we must have a very clear balancing act between the investor interest and the community lead Kenya's interest. That's very important, because somebody has invested in this, not for 3 years or 5 years, And I think we need to do that. The question of transporting it by road, I think the gentleman who was talking to the, probably to the community, has to look at the economics of scale.
Mr. Omeke.
Yes. If you look in the long run, it's very expensive investing in the pipeline, but in the long run it will be cheaper. And I think that's what we need to look at it. But I think to me, probably I will not put a penny in terms of oil in this country will have any significant impact in terms of our GDP. I will not.
Right, thank you.
Probably we have to give that information from the expectations of Kenyans.
Managing the expectations.
Okay.
Yes.
Let's say from Collins, then, of course, there was an issue also of you wanted to weigh in on disclosure of information as we're preparing also your headline thoughts this morning, Collins.
Dibal, I think for me I'm fairly clear that whatever investments happen in this country must be able to benefit the people of Kenya. That's, I think, is statement number one. Statement number two, we must then be able to realize that as we are investing, we are attracting investors. So how do we make the climate favorable to them? And I think Wainaina has made a point at the end, which I think is extremely important, but we'll ignore. We must balance the interests of both groups. We must balance the interests of the investor and the interests of the citizen. Unfortunately, a lot of the times we speak, depending on what our viewpoints are, as if the investor is superior to the citizens. The other times we speak as if the investor is not putting in money. I think the element of balancing is critical. And what are the things that ensure we balance? The things that ensure we balance are the kind of policies and laws we put in place. The second thing that ensures we balance is how effective do we then implement those laws and policies. The third thing that ensures we balance is how well do we then resolve any disputes that come out of it. And if you read also a different report yesterday, there's a report that measures the rule of law across the world. And that report said that Kenya's number was, I think, 100 and something out of 122. We were actually in the bottom 20, telling you that our environment for dealing with all those things, our environment for having clear policies and laws, our environment for enforcing those laws effectively, and our environment for resolving disputes is still lopsided. So you will hear investors crying, you will hear citizens crying. At the end of the day, the only people who benefit are people who are gaming the system, and that is what we must sort, both in this issue of oil and in all the other investments and governance decisions that affect this country.
All right, thank you. Mandugu?
Yeah, so on the issue of disclosure, those particular contracts, the way they were signed, obviously they had a confidentiality clause. But one thing that you have to understand is that that was done prior to the Constitution, to the promulgation of the Constitution. And in those particular clauses, disclosure was possible or was allowed if parties to the contract consented to that particular disclosure.
But this particular contract with the Tullow, that was it was not before the promulgation of the Constitution.
No. The PSC, it was signed before.
Okay.
It was signed before.
All right.
Now the question is this: what we need to look at, even as jurists, is that what is the effect of the promulgation of the Constitution in respect to prior contracts that have been signed?
Okay.
One thing that is very clear: me and you, we cannot sit down and agree to go contrary to to violate the Constitution.
Exactly.
That is not possible. So basically, I think what ought to have been done at that time, especially on matters of disclosure, then they ought to have been renegotiated that particular clause, or to have parameters under which this particular disclosure will have to be made by operation of the law. Why am I saying that? When the Constitution came in, Article 166 gives Kenyans the right to benefit from investments in their land. This extraction that is going on obviously is a development of which the people in Turkana, or where the oil is found, expect some legitimate expectation. So there is a legitimate expectation for them to benefit from that particular development. Now, the problem is that if they are not able to get that expectation now, because of the procedures and processes that were contained in that particular agreement, then the best thing will have been is that make that disclosure and sensitize the people.
Yes, because
so that they can be able to manage that legitimate expectation that they have that has been given to them by the Constitution.
Right, because I
think that is where the officials of the ministry need to look at. That's something that they need to have a look at. Because if you don't, then somebody who has been given a constitutional right will come and demonstrate he has a right to picket. He will stop the trucks. He will stop every other person from he'll actually stop the operations.
Thank you.
And they'll have a constitutional basis or legitimacy for them to do that particular.